go. What's up, everybody? Derek Jonhson here. Some know me as Rattle Trap 1776. Again, as always, be careful of the frauds and scams out there. There's a lot of frauds and scams using my name, brand, image, and likeness. There's another one that's popped up on YouTube, and they put the video up before I do. But if someone means well, then be sure to see rattletrap1776.com for my #1 best-selling books. But be sure to follow the correct pages, because a lot of these people are trying to message you with all kinds of stuff that I never talk about, don't talk about, won't talk about. That's not what I do. So Linktree, linktr.ee/1776nation. If there's not a page on that Linktree, it's not mine, or either I don't want you to know about it. I do have a couple private Facebooks just in case there was any shenanigans by Facebook, but haven't had any of those lately. So, but I had those ready to roll just in case. So we're going to do it back to the basics today. I'm going to show a little compassion, a little sympathy for all the new people who may be following, first-time followers, first time hearing about me, whatever it could be. I do have back to the basic videos out there. However, this is going to be up to date, up to speed. So I'm going to rattle off through a lot of these. It's up to you to take this video, go back and watch it, slow it down, or if you don't want to, then everything's right here in part 1 and part 2, except for the things that's happened from January of this year to present day, because I'm working on part 3, which will be the finale of the 45-47. So as always, here's your visual. A lot of people don't realize President Trump has this on his ball cap, 45-47, the dash matters. All right, and I'm the one who obviously started that hashtag and also got the apparel for it, but the dash matters. All right, it most certainly means what it means. All right, so we're going to rattle off here. It's going to be fun. I have my notes here, even though I don't need notes, but I have my notes because I want to keep everything there consistent, and we're going to rattle off. So first things first, President Donald John Trump. All right, 2015. You got to go way back to 2015. All right, but before you saw him roll down the escalator June the 16th, all right, June the 12th, a new law war manual was established. It was printed. It was put out for your public consumption. All right, it's over 1,200 pages long. So that's like I tell people, when you want to quote unquote debate me, combat me, or whatever term you want to use, you probably want to make sure you've read everything I've read, because that law war manual alone is over 1,200 pages, and it don't read the way people thinks it does. It don't read in a chronological from the standpoint of it's, you know, from top to bottom, and that's how it works. It's like a reference book, and it puts certain things in certain places, and it's a reference point. All right. So military lawyers and federal, they took Lieber Code, Geneva Code, and all these different Nuremberg trials, etc. Then they took different law war manuals, took all the strengths from those, combined those, put that out June the 12th, 2015. 4 days later, you think it's a coincidence that President Donald John Trump rolls down the escalator and announces his candidacy? I don't think so. All right. All throughout the campaign, if you'll remember, it was, oh, he's never going to be president. Never, 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 never. Oh, it's a joke. He won't be. Remember all the mainstream media? Never, 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 nevers? Yeah? Well, that was all done on purpose. All right, because that's what got everybody's attention. Kind of like American Idol. American Idol, The Voice, and all those shows are also trash. They're not real. It's also why I also have another #1 bestseller called The Royal Flush of Country Music, because I have Billboard hits independently, and I beat the system. All right, all those TV shows, you're a syndicated audience. They already know they have you locked in, and then what do? They have tryouts, and they let people go out there and try out. Right? And then that becomes what? That's vocal marketing. Hey, I tried out. Go watch me. Let's see if I made it. And then what do people do? As many people try out, more people go watch, right? So, bingo. They had everybody stirred from the get-go because President Trump was an outsider. He was not a politician. All right. Remember also in the campaign trail, there are all these Republicans, record number of Republicans running for president. All right. That was strategic and on purpose. And if you'll go back and watch and listen, good Lord have mercy. You want to talk about, it sounded like pantomime, but if you go back and watch now, especially once you learn the 45-47, you'll see how strategic it was. President Trump was in there with a big old stick, and he was just whacking them right upside the head. This guy here's a liar. He called Ted Cruz the biggest liar on the stage. Marco Rubio, but some of them didn't have stuff on their records possibly, right? And they could be used as a pawn and are working under him. All right, so, a lot of people have forgotten how to find the good in somebody and or say, hey, I got a line on the sand for you. You can come over and do what's right by the people. A lot of people have forgotten about forgiveness out there. Boy, you want it when it happens to you. But God forbid for anybody else, right? So, all these Republicans, the rhinos, it was calling out the rhinos and draining the rhinos. Have you seen Paul Ryan anywhere? Anybody remember Paul Ryan? Where's Mitt Romney? Where are all these rhinos, people? Where'd they go? All right, all done on purpose. Then Jeb Bush asked President Trump, and I'm paraphrasing. You can go back and watch. All right, but for layman's terms, I paraphrase. Jeb Bush asked 3 questions on this campaign, in this debate. And it was strategic. And this is what tipped me off, if you will. I already knew certain things, and I was already tracking on certain things, but this is what showed, oh, we're green to go. And this is why I started documenting things from 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and then I published these things called the documents, the documents.info, that's still up to this day. I published those January 2021 that I already showed you in the military occupation. All right? So, already knew. How did I know? How do I know? So, this series of questions, Jeb Bush said, who's going to vote for you, who's going to back you, and who's going to support you? I love smart alecks when it comes to, if you know what you know and you standing tall, you standing firm, you can stand through the fire and you can take it, that's when you can be a smart aleck. President Trump said, well, that's a loaded question, Jeb. If the moderator would give me time, I'm going to answer that for you. One, the American people are going to vote for me because they're tired of BS politicians like you. Every single one of you get on this stage and you tell the American people what they want to hear and you never back it up. I'm going to win the American people over by the economy. And when I'm doing that, the American people will trust me with the military because never again will we voice to the public what we're doing with our military, meaning we're not going to forecast it. See, everything I talk about is already past the forecast. It's already been shown. That's why so many people are struggling. And the reason why you're struggling is because you're lazy and you're complacent, right? You want it spoon-fed to you. Right? Because everything I talk about is already been done. President Trump said we're not going to forecast it to you. Meaning we're not going to tell you ahead of time what we're going to do. Now, I have things in these books over here. This was December 2023, which stemmed from the documents. But I have things that are in laws and orders that the operation's still ongoing. And there's certain operations and missions that look like others already done that you can say, well, the military is still at the border. Also, the military is still here. The military is still doing this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can kind of predict those, but it's not a prediction like these other people try to do, where someone tries to get correct about something and says, oh, I was right. Come follow me. Those are the ones that get you in trouble. All right. So Jeb Bush said that. And then President Trump said, and who's going to support me? I have 200 generals backing me right now, more to come. Now, anybody who's met me across the country the last 3 years at events and things, I've told you, and you know I have, those of you who met me, I've told you specifically, President Trump has over 800 generals backing him. What happened just this past week? What did Hegseth do? Meet with who? 800 flag officers? How do I know? How did I know? There's not another single podcaster out there who said that. It's because they're not veterans. All right. February, moving into 2016, which we just covered. That was mainly the 2016 campaign trail, but now we're going to get into some more specific visuals. February 2016, Obama was speaking somewhere, and Obama said, we're going to shut down Guantanamo Bay. Now, keep in mind, he would have been president from February 2016 to January the 20th at 11:59 a.m. Eastern Standard Time of 2017. So they had almost, that was 11 months to shut down Guantanamo Bay, which would require Congress to do so. Obama said that. Obama had an executive order in place to shut down Guantanamo Bay. It was active. All right, Congress didn't do so. But President Trump, the same day he heard Obama say that, February 2016, he spoke somewhere and he said, oh, and by the way, we're keeping Guantanamo Bay open. And we're going to get there in a minute. So April 2016, a new Special Operations Command Unconventional Warfare Pocket Guide came about, which specifically talks about government in exile, shadow governments, and also Executive Order 12333, which is the political assassination executive order. Very key. Ties into a lot of things. And then also it speaks about in there, about a revolution. And it's got a pyramid in there. And the pyramid is for revolutions, meaning when the good guys are in control, there's certain tactics that we can use to flip the cultural norms. All right? Flip the people who are considered sheep, brainwashed, lost, fall prey to anything just because it sounds good, looks good, fool's gold. All right? That kind of thing. There's a pyramid. Above that pyramid, it specifically says the military can act without the United States government. Too many people in this nation think that the military and the government are the same component. They're not. The military is separate. That's why you have idiots out there looking like morons when they're in some fake uniform and people just fall for it, and then they blow up somebody before they realize that's not a real uniform. That's not a real unit, and all these things. And then, again, you end up looking like the moron for sharing it. You look more like the moron than the moron who is actually trying to trick you. And we don't want you looking like morons. All right, so April, that Special Operations Command puts out this new Unconventional Warfare Pocket Guide. May 2016. April, May, just a month later. Out of nowhere, the more liberal Supreme Court back in, Ginsburg and all that crew, some retired, some dead already. Out of nowhere, they clarify in the Military Justice Act of 2016, out of nowhere now, they clarified how military courts and laws are separate from federal courts and laws. Bingo. Thank you, libtards. All right, November the 8th. The miracle, for some of you that thought it was a miracle, the miracle happened. All strategically planned. All right, that's when the military actually took over the elections. All right, President Trump's already alluded to this. He's already alluded to how Hillary cheated. All right, they have the numbers on that. The only way to have the real numbers on that is military cyber commands and National Security Council, and in the military, and our military systems, which are analog. All right, not digital. We can't be hacked. When we get the number, we got the number. Also in the middle of the night, it's like wee hours of the morning, I stayed up and I screenshot this photo that was on Fox News at that time period. Time-stamped everything. It was a picture of President Trump and Putin side by side, and it said, "Ready for reset." Reset. Now, at that time period, if I would have been talking to friends and family, they would have thought that, like some do now, oh, you don't, oh, that's just a coincidence, that's crazy, oh, that don't mean that. It most certainly does mean that. Now that you have all of the CBDCs that have been hammered, all of the global banks that have been hammered, it most certainly is a global reset. All right, all the things you've seen with the U.S. currency, all the different currencies, all these things, it most certainly is real and did happen and is happening. All right, now let's move into 2017. All right, January the 10th, Anthony Fauci, Georgetown University, 10 days before President Trump took his oath, the famous oath. All right, in my book it says January the 13th, and some of those dates, some of these people have gone back and changed these dates on things, but either way, neither here nor there, it happened right before President Trump, a week before, give or take, all right, at Georgetown University. Anthony Fauci specifically said, that he guaranteed that an outbreak never seen before, serious outbreak, was going to happen in a few years to the incoming administration. How did they know that? How did they know it? All right. Now, that was genocide. They knew they'd been taken over. And then all of the acts committed by your governors, your mayors, your hospital boards, board of trustees, and your doctors, the blood's on your hands, pals. And some of you nurses out there, you holier than thou because someone don't have a nursing degree, some of you are going to have to live with it too, depending on how far they go down on all of you traitors. All right. You do 3 years on the 2017, and that puts you at what? 2020. See, that's why terminology matters. He said in a few years. He didn't say a couple. He said in a few. All right. January the 17th, Federal Continuity Directive 1 was reissued. That's a new overall book for continuity government. Things of that nature, the national essential functions of what the government will be doing, what courts will be doing, what law enforcement, everything. Very key. Also the same day, Joint Operations publication 3-0 was put out, which that's the military component. Here's your government, here's your military. The same day. Same day. Then January the 20th, the famous oath taken by President Donald John Trump, where the military wearing certain insignia walked down behind him, military intelligence, judge advocate general. At the same time he was saying we're going to take the power out of D.C., give it back to you the people. Very key. Military intel, judge advocate general. So this right here ties in. When you see any moron out there posing in a fake uniform or what appears to be a military uniform telling you that something's unconstitutional and not to obey the orders, they probably want to know the bigger picture, because when they think they're sounding the alarm, and they think they're actually sounding the alarm that they're a traitor, because they don't even know the bigger picture of what's in place and how all this ties in, and it equals this 45-47. This is a full visual. It's not 45 alone, dash alone, 47 alone. This is not 4 years, 4 years, 4 years. It's 45-47. The whole thing is an operation. All right. February the 9th Executive Order 13773. You'll see that attached to your OCD ETF. All right? And I'm going to read a little bit of that just really fast. The Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force is an independent component of the Department of Justice, established in 1982, which would be President Ronald Reagan. All right. It's the centerpiece of the Attorney General's strategy to combat transnational organized crime and to reduce the availability of illicit narcotics in the nation by using a prosecutor-led multi-agency approach to enforcement. All right, and in this, on the justice.gov write-up, it tells you, since the creation of the International Organized Crime Intelligence Operations Center within OCD ETF in 2009, followed by OCD ETF's inclusion of the President's strategy in 2011, which be Obama, all right, and subsequent direction, specific direction in the Presidential Executive Order 13773. The OCD ETF's mission expanded to include multi-agency investigation and coordination of all forms of transnational organized crime. OCD ETF is the largest anti-crime task force in the country, led by an executive office, the President, and accountable for over 500 federal prosecutors, 1,200 federal agents, and some 5,000 state and local police. OCD ETF implements a nationwide strategy combining priority targeting, coordination, intelligence sharing, and directed resourcing to have the greatest impact disrupting and dismantling command and control elements of criminal organizations. It goes on to tell you on another page, the OCD ETF is the Attorney General's strategy to combat transnational organized crime and to reduce the availability of illicit narcotics in the nation by using the prosecutor-led multi-agency approach to enforcement. OCD ETF leverages the resources and expertise of its partners in concentrated, coordinated, long-term enterprise investigations of transnational organized crime, money laundering, hello Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and major drug trafficking networks. March 29th, opioids. President Trump, Executive Order 13784, combating opioids. I don't know what part of Big Farm that President Trump is hammering people don't understand, except for the people who don't what? Listen and pay attention. Because that's exactly what all these are doing. And all these task forces are combating it. And there's visuals of this daily, weekly, monthly. October 2017. No, go back. June the 13th, 2017. Skip one. June the 13th, 2017. Federal Continuity Directive 2 was put out. So you have FCD 1 back here 3 days before the famous oath, and then you have FCD 2, June 13th, which is the implementation phase of the broader picture. This shows you more the implementations. 3 days later, Joint Planning by the military publication put out. Joint Planning 5-0. They coincide together because that's a military separate, and here's your government over here. Now, October 2017, amending Executive Order 13223. The reason why that's important is that is an amendment to way back in 2001 when we had the quote-unquote terrorist attack. This is an amendment to Title 10, Sections 688 and 690. Title 10 is presidential authority for the president to call up the National Guard into federal service. And there's multiple sections under Title 10 and Title 32, but Title 10 is presidential. Title 10 is the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Title 10, Military Code of Justice, is what? Your military law. That's why certain soldiers out there look stupid right now. They look traitor and stupid. if they're saying anything, because they don't know these things. They don't teach these in basic training. They don't teach these in tech school. And they also don't teach this too much at the academies. It's all been tech-based on whatever your job is, what you're going to be doing, your role and duty inside the military, not the laws and the orders. That's why a majority of soldiers look ridiculous. And I'm not apologizing for it, because I'm a soldier who knows it, and I know other soldiers who know it. So therefore, how do we know it? December 20th, 2017, President Trump's first national emergency declared through Executive Order 13818 for human rights abuse. Why would quote-unquote Joe continue that executive order? If President Trump is a dictator, a fascist, a threat, destroying America, destroying the Constitution, that's one of those that old quote-unquote Joe shared 4 years in a row, just to hand right back to President Donald John Trump on January the 20th, 2025, which also shows simultaneous how all these quote-unquote soldiers look stupid again. Why? If President Trump's a threat, if President Trump's giving unconstitutional laws and orders, then why did quote-unquote Joe continue all of them? You morons! There's one thing I can't stand is a traitor soldier. They should hit the gallows quicker than any other criminal out there. Should be those first. Don't even need a quick trial. Your trial was showing how dumb you are. 2018, January the 30th, 2018, Executive Order 13823. President Trump puts his new order in for keeping Guantanamo Bay open. So how come, quote-unquote, Joe, you moron traitor soldiers out there, how come, quote-unquote, Joe couldn't cancel, terminate, revoke that order? How is that order still active to this date, September 29th? How? You freaking morons? You traitors? How? He couldn't take a pen and paper and revoke it? Executive authority? It's called an executive order, which means the president takes a pen and paper and wrote an executive order. Therefore, a president must do what to get rid of it? Revoke it. Give us another executive order. Revocation. So I don't want to hear no complaints and crying and boo-hooing and all that other bull crap when you see Guantanamo Bay in full action. March the 1st, Executive Order 13825, an amendment to the Courts Martial Handbook. That's the good one. President Trump put the authority back into the hands of the judges, and when they make a decision, boop, done, baby. It don't bounce back anywhere. It don't go down to this, that, no. No, that's why he calls it the quick trial. Trial in the morning, evidence presented, decision made. If your ass is guilty, especially if it's treason, you're going straight to the firing squad by that evening. You're living, breathing, sitting there, your butthole tighter than a nun in a Sturgis rally, hoping, oh, they find me not guilty. Nope. Nope. Right to the guillotine, right to the gallows, right to the firing squad you go. You should have done what was right to begin with. Obama changed the courts-martial process I don't know how many times. It favored the terrorists. It favored terrorists over our own soldiers. That is how corrupt the military got. That is how corrupt this nation got. That's how corrupt Congress got. That's why I don't issue any apologies. That's why I don't care if you think I'm rude, straightforward, direct, pompous ass, whatever you can call me. Because you people just don't really know how bad this got and how close it was to losing this nation. all because of complacency and laziness, and also people with no spines and no balls and no backbones. June 24, 2018, one of the first articles hits out there about the Army was spending $572 million for our next wars will be fought in mega cities, not inside them, but beneath them. So all these people whining, complaining, griping, fussing about the militaries in the streets right now, guess what they weren't doing back then? They weren't whining, complaining then when it was hitting the articles back then. See, people don't care until they're told to care. And then they don't even know what they're yelling and yelling. The ones on the left definitely don't know what they're yelling and fussing for. And they think that everything that is military is either fascist or communist or all these other things. They have no idea. A wolf in sheep's clothing presented as their own child could be sitting in their own living room and they wouldn't know it. Because we have educated America on all the wrong things. And I have a master's degree from an accredited college. And I can sit here and tell you, we have educated Americans on all the wrong things. Everything that Americans have an education with, all it does is help you material-wise. Bigger house, better cars, diamonds, gold, whatever that is. Has nothing to do with your happiness and your longevity of your happiness, because if your money ever dries up, game over. We have dummied down America on things that don't matter. That was June 2018. September the 12th, Executive Order 13848, one of my favorites. Everybody knows. A national emergency for election interference. Now, why would, quote-unquote, Joe Biden continue that one? President Trump issued it. And he'd already told you way back here about Hillary. Also, Title 32. The man they called Mad Dog Mattis, Marine Corps. Title 32 order put in place in 2018 put all the National Guard out at the polls in 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024. Now, if President Trump is a threat and violating this and a dictator and a fascist, then why in the hell were the National Guard on the same Title 32 order from way back here in 2018 at the polls doing federal duty in 2022 and 2024? The only thing you can slice that hair anymore, that old saying, you slice it, all right, you split in hairs now. The only way you can split that hair is to say that President Trump issued an executive order, signed an executive order with a national emergency that was going to damn his administration for election interference. That's the only way you can split that hair is to say, oh, well, Joe Biden continued that because they caught Donald Trump cheating on the election. Da, 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 da. And it's been continued all the way up to just a few weeks ago. It got continued for another year, which means they're not ready to disclose all that. It also ties into January the 6th, which we'll explain that when we get there for that J6. October the 20th, 2018. President Trump announced we were leaving the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Range Treaty with Russia. All right. And it sounds like, oh, we're leaving a treaty. Oh, that's disastrous. That could lead to this. No, it actually leads to peace. It actually equals peace of a Nash equilibrium. And you have to go look all this up. Again, I already have it all outlined in the book. I have it outlined on my pages. All right. It equals Nash equilibrium in a peace. Because it says in there, it's called MAD. It's a MAD doctrine, mutually assured destruction. All right, and it specifically says that you won't fire first. Like if you have the capabilities with nuclear, you won't fire unless fired upon, which actually ends up being what? What it says, Nash equilibrium. Because if you have more power, but you got a hothead over here thinking, well, we can destroy you. but they really can't, and you have more power, and they don't actually destroy you and get lucky, then guess what comes back on them? Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. All right, now we're moving into 2019. February 2019. President Trump issues Proclamation 9844. That's the order that all the troops from 2019 to present day at the southern border, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. That's the proclamation and Title 10 order that all those troops are working under. So again, all you moron traitors out there in your uniforms who are using military as a crutch for stability, paychecks, and privileges, all right, why would quote-unquote Joe, why not, okay, if President Trump's a threat and a dictator and a fascist and all these things, all of the troops that are at the border are operating under Proclamation 9844. There's no other Title 10 in place for that. There's another Title 10 by President Trump that we're getting to in a minute that could still apply to that, but it's still who? President Donald John Trump. There was one on paper, quote-unquote, Title 10, but when you know what a government in exile is, when you know what a civil affairs government in exile puppet government is, there was only one Title 10 where, quote-unquote, Joe, to the average onlooker who don't know all these special and strategic operations and unconventional warfare, it was 3,000 reserve out of the 1 million reserves that President Trump invoked in the March that we're getting to in a minute. He's the one who invoked the bigger 1 million reserves. This would have been a order under that, pulling 3,000 reserves out of that number, because it had not been revoked. Very key. All right, May 2019. There's a publication put out by a female officer of the United States Army, and she writes about the shaping the future conflicts of what? Underground facilities, underground war, subterranean warfare, which is what the June 24, 2018 articles starting were all about. 26 of 31 combat brigades were going to be fighting underground, training, fighting, and it says specifically, again, the wording says our military will be fighting in mega cities, not inside them, but beneath them. And you have seen evidence of this everywhere. New York being one of them, Israel being another. It didn't just mean the United States. All right. So this publication, this female who writes this big paper, it ties into $572 million that was being spent. There's a Canadian defense manual out there that was 2019-2020, and it talks about the $572 million, which is going to come in 2020 here shortly. You're going to see how it all ties in if you're listening. All right, so that publication, December the 20th, 2019. Very, very key. Very, very key. Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550. Section 1550 was not put in the War Powers Act until December the 20th, 2019. It's a part of the NDAA of 2020, which is your National Defense Authorization Act, which is your defense budget. And it specifically says in there that this is basically temporary. It don't say it like that, but it words it. This is a part of the NDAA of 2020, which means that as long as it's in operation, it's going to be in Chapter 33 of Title 50, which is your War Powers Act. When it's done, which it's showing that strategic and special operation, when it's done, it won't be in there. Or it'll be terminated in there and still recorded there, but it'll be terminated. Meaning, there won't be future presidents using that as an abuse of power. Very key. That particular clause in Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550 is very key. It says in the first 180 days after December the 20th, 2019, and every 180 days thereafter, the President shall submit to the Defense Committees the use of military force, regular and irregular. Irregular, there's your clandestine and covert operations, meaning secretive until we want you to know about it. That's also your irregular warfare and your unconventional warfare. That's your Special Operations Command. That's your pyramid. That's where the political assassinations, that's how I proved Charlie Kirk was not real. It was a part of the operation. You got to know these things. And it's unique, yes. It's strategic, yes. It's special, yes. And this right here you won't ever see again, the 45-47, because it is a unique strategic special operation. Meaning everything in it is unique. Therefore, you need to divorce your emotions and your feelings. And once you see all of the components of all the laws and orders from the military and the federal and how they can join, then it'll make sense. Then you should be excited that CK is in a special operation to save humanity and the world. Anyone who's butthurt over it, well, you have your head so far up your butt, you can check your own tonsils out. Okay? And I'm going to try to be as nice and sweet as possible after that. Also, December the 20th, 2019, the Space Force was established. You need to go look at a few other things, the Global Fragility Act. There's a few things on that day that happened all on that day that I have in the book here. You can go read about. But the bigger things, I'm outlining the military here. All right. That specifically also covers all of the other actions taken by President Trump with the military. Which is key because Obama don't have his name in there. Supreme Court docket 23-939. Obama's ass is grass. 2020. Executive Order 13903. This is about human trafficking and online child exploitation. President Trump has been the most pro-president going after all forms of trafficking, but especially child trafficking. That's why you hear Tom Homan over and over again saying how many children's been rescued. Now, all these operations have been done. This has been a slow rollout because there was so much corruption and so many things that had to be done. It had to be done this way. So the whole thing's been done. You're just watching the movie. That's why you'll hear other people out there saying you're watching a movie. Well, that's the movie aspect of it. The actual operations were and are real, yes, but they've already been done. It was just so many things that had to be unveiled and rolled out that the average American public who calls a retired veteran like myself, amongst all the colleagues that are also highly decorated that I know very well that show you their faces, but also the ones I know that you don't know that won't ever show their faces, won't listen to people like us. Oh, no, hell no. We're conspiracy theorists and how come there's not an... If there were 10 veterans talking, you want 20. If there were 20, you want 50. If there were 50, you want 100. You're never satisfied. And that's why they call you an American. March 23rd, this was disclosure by the captured, by a wartime president captured mainstream media. They're all under a wartime code, 47 United States Code, Section 606, which is called War Powers of the President. And there's plenty of examples how they've all been captured. And showing you the wartime order, showing you the wartime operation. article comes out that President Trump was going to install a general just in case the law breaks down. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't install a general. That is not the correct terminology. They use that terminology to show you that none of this is real-time real. But you got to know what real-time real is in order to know what is real and what ain't real. That's why these certain soldiers look ridiculous right now. All right, March 27th. Executive Order 13912. Most people during that time period, you were so caught up with the quote-unquote word COVID at that time that they had you out. There's a Charlie Daniels song, country music singer, and he has a song said, I had them all out there stepping and fetching like their heads were on fire and their asses were catching. Well, that's what most of you look like back in 2020. You weren't listening to people like me, and I specifically talked back then to my friends and family what little I had. Some listened, some didn't. But again, I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only veteran that knew what was going on. And every one of you, you know. If you are the veteran, kudos to you because you know. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing, keeping your oath. If you're someone who didn't listen to your veteran who knew, family, friend, whoever, again, we prove our point daily. All right, Executive Order 13912 was not for COVID only. That is the order where President Trump invoked Title 10, Section 12302, 1 million reserve components. March 30th. I love this one still. March the 30th, President Trump has a press conference. He tells the whole freaking world hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine. 36 million doses of hydroxychloroquine and 6 million doses of chloroquine. And more to come. He also said during that time period that Pfizer was working on a vaccine, but they wouldn't be ready for another 14 to 16 months out. You know why he said it that way? He wasn't condoning Pfizer. He wasn't condoning Big Pharma. He was putting him on the spot, meaning you better obey a military order, military government order, not a federal government order. Why did President Trump say in present tense, we have administered to the United States government, we have administered to the United States government, governors, hospitals, and doctors. He's telling you he's a wartime president. And he even said he was a wartime president back in a press conference back then. People don't listen because you don't know terminology. You don't even know the simple terminology and the definition, much less how to apply it. And that's what I'm here for. And it always sounds like I'm beating you up, but I'm not. He specifically said that. And he was putting all those big pharma on the spot. Meaning you better obey me as your wartime president in a wartime situation or face the consequences. So see, you got to be careful out there. I've seen people do it. I've seen people call themselves patriots. Well, why did he say this? And what? You're not listening to the full context because you don't know the broad spectrum. You get caught up on hiccups. You get hung up on hiccups. You always have to keep the broad 45-47 spectrum first, then always work your way down. And when you know that foundation of laws and orders up here, the bigger ones, then you can take an item and work your way down to it and study that one. Then bring yourself back up. And when another item pops up, a little individual trickle, go down to that with your laws and orders from up here. That's how that works. Every time. And that's how you'll know if it's constitutional, if it's real. Is this made up? Is this fake? Is someone out there that did this trickle through the internet somewhere and it didn't come from the main source? If it ain't on the .gov, .mil site, probably want to stay away from it. He put them on the spot. He said 14 to 16 months out. What did Pfizer do? They had a what ready for everybody? They had them a jab, didn't they? And people took Pfizer, Jonhson & Jonhson, Moderna, all of them. President Trump sitting there telling you the whole time, hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine. Now, you got to remember back in 2019, all you ladies, next month, just in a day and a half, guess what's coming up? Halloween month. And all these people who whine and bitch and fuss and complain about the economy, oh, they got money to go buy them a suit for a half a night. Oh, we got some money to spend on Halloween, don't we? Yeah, you do, don't you? Yeah, you always make money for stuff you want to make money for, but every other time you want to whine, complain, and gripe about the economy. All right? You wonder what this has to do with anything. Halloween. So President Trump, in April, he started talking about all these things, right? And then you got all these people out there whining, complaining, griping. Back in 2019, women, where you at, ladies? Remember all the women dressing up? I'm going to try to find a better word for it, but I don't know another word, and I'm not going to say the scientific word for it. I'm not going to say it, but you know your region? I call it the hoo-ha. All right, women were at these rallies in hoo-ha suits, like a Halloween costume that looks like the Down Under. My body, my choice, my body, my choice. Remember that? Remember all that? Now, I know some of that was strategic because it was such a candid visual. Like, you're like, oh, gosh. They make suits that look like that. God almighty. My body, my choice. Women got money to go buy them a suit that looks like a hoo-ha. The very next year, majority of those same people are doing what? It's your fault, President Trump. People are dying. It's your fault. It's your fault. It's your fault. That is what I talk about with principles. You either stand for something or you don't. It's either your body, your choice, and then nobody can tell you what to do, no matter who it is. Or you want the president to say, yep, don't take that or take that. But then when he starts telling you what you should and shouldn't take, not an option, but what you should and shouldn't take, listen, hear me now. There's that terminology. When he tells you what you can and can't, then he can tell you what? I don't want you drinking. I don't want you smoking. You ain't getting no tattoo. Whatever it may be. So then you're going to really go what? Oh, you're a dictator. No, it's either your body, your choice, or you want the president to tell you what to do with your body. There's no splitting of the hairs there. That's what was taking place. He suggested, he said, I highly suggest hydroxychloroquine. But then he also said that we have administered to the United States government, governors, boards, hospital boards, and doctors. He's speaking from a military standpoint. So you, my friends, have all your governors, mayors, hospital boards, doctors, and some nurses to blame. Because they know, and majority of them, none of them were taking the quote-unquote jab. Too much time spent on that, but it needed to be said. April the 1st, Southern Command with 22 joint partners launched a operation for all your drug trafficking. Still in operations today. All the Venezuelan boat strikes you've been seeing the liberals whine and complain about, same countries with the United States of America. Southern Command. Guess who puts out those articles every time it happens? Southern Command. April the 1st, 2020. There you go, you traitor moron soldiers out there. How come, quote-unquote, Joe didn't terminate that command, those orders? How come he didn't terminate that operation? You freaking morons. April the 4th, Executive Order 13913. That's the one that ties in with Charlie Kirk and everything else. All right, how it's all operational way back April the 4th, 2020. That's the one that established the Team Telecom, which is to do with the FCC granting and denying mainstream media, radio, TV, internet, broadcast, which ties into your restricting telecommunications, which is an emergency power by the president, and it ties into 47 U.S. Code, Section 606, which is war powers of the president to revoke, rescind, terminate, whatever it needs to do, anything to do with FCC communications, no matter who it is. So why would quote-unquote Joe be the one who established the team for the Team Telecom? December 2021. Hello, you traitor morons out there. Hello, you libtards. You calling President Trump a fascist, a dictator, and violating the Constitution and giving unconstitutional orders. Why would quote-unquote Joe establish the team for Team Telecom in 2021? Why are there congressional reports in 2023 and 2024 for Team Telecom? Which means a team was established. Oh, man. I love when people look stupid like these traitor soldiers. April the 30th, Executive Order 13919. President Trump gave a direct order to the Secretary of Defense. Title 10, Section 12304. Title 10, there it is again. Not been revoked, not been rescinded, still active. In that executive order, it specifically talks about a special operation in the Western Hemisphere. All along the way, you've seen President Trump occasionally put up a post on Truth Social that the majority of patriots didn't go join when he told you to, so therefore you're not a real President Trump supporter or patriot. All right, if you're complaining out there, all right. So he put up occasionally things about what? Western Hemisphere. Consistent with the verbiage from way back here, and all these orders still going at the same time. July the 1st. July the 1st. He tore up NAFTA and established the USMCA, which is the Canadian-Mexican Agreement. So how can all these Canadians that are on the liberal side of things, how are they saying that Canada don't want to be associated with President Trump? USMCA proves that, and some military operations with Canada also proves that. There have been Canadian aircraft all over our regional, national, and municipal and county airports in the U.S. without National Guard components. Military aircraft. Trainers. They're not training. August 2020. Article comes out that Johnson & Johnson got hammered in a court case in the state of Oklahoma, which was the first state with all counties. Every single county in the state of Oklahoma went red in 2024. Johnson & Johnson lost an opioids case. Who has an executive order for opioids, combating opioids? That would be President Donald John Trump. Yeah. And President Trump told everybody, we're not paying for it anymore, somebody else will. With anything. Johnson & Johnson loses an opioids case in August 2020. And guess how much they were forced to pay? $572 million. Weird. Now, what are the odds of that? $572 million. Now, that is a random number to pull out the hat. And that number just happens to match with June the 24th, 2018, military articles coming out that the Army is spending $572 million training their 26 and 31 combat brigades to go fight underground. Weird. And then we got a Army publication by a female major of the Army. Shout out ladies who do know what's going on, right? $572 million. Then you have the Canadian, hello maple syrup, we have the Canadian Defense putting out that they support the U.S. and Israel operations with the $572 million. And then the same month of August that the freaking, opioids, Jonhson & Jonhson, no relation, thank God, loses their rear end in court, there happens to be a publication put out by the Defense Intelligence Agency about North Korea and Iran, and it's specifically about Iran, and guess what it talks about in there? About the what? Underground tunnels in North Korea and Iran. Weird. Funny how that works. Remember all them people losing their minds when President Trump took out Iran's nuclear facilities? Look at all them rhino Republicans. Oh boy, we're not sending our children to war. You have no idea what's going on by the man you claim to support. And a lot of you are members under him and don't have a clue what's going on. Shame, shame, shame. September the 15th, the Abraham Accords. What has President Trump been talking about in the last few days? Abraham Accords. 2020. Go figure. November the 4th, Election Day. When rhinos, Republicans, conservatives, patriots, MAGA, they cheated. You didn't even have a clue what was going on. The whole thing was an operation. They captured everything. 4-star General Jonhson put out a truth back then about the Cyber Command, National Security Council, and joint partners all over the world were watching the elections. This is an operation. It's a sting operation, ladies and gentlemen. They're collecting all the data for you. And if you don't need the data, if you're already a patriot and you already are happy-go-lucky and you love President Trump, then great. But this is for all the morons out there who they yell laws and orders but don't know anything about it. They yell laws and orders but don't even know how to apply them. They yell laws and orders but they only want them to apply to their narrative, not everybody. December the 7th, Executive Order 13961, the invocation of continuity of government. Skipped one. November the 12th, Executive Order 13959, which was the freezing of the assets of the Chinese Communist military, which this book right here is 636 pages that the FBI gave to Rudy Giuliani, who was a lawyer for President Donald John Trump, who gave this to Marco Polo, and they put this book together, 636 pages of all the sex trafficking, all the prostitution, all the money laundering, everything. There's your OCD, ETF money laundering, all the Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and all of them. Obama, they're all in here. Hillary, Bill, they're all of them. Right here. And it shows quote-unquote Joe, but the actual real Joe was making handshakes for $2 and $3 million just for a handshake in China. And I didn't even mention all the capitulations that took place from 2017 to 2020. That's why you have President Xi in this book, but President Xi and all these other people who capitulated to President Trump. And they're doing exactly as they're told because we have it all. We call them all. Right? That executive order, one of those 8 executive orders, that old Joe continued right over to President Trump. For all the people who thought Joe was real, which he wasn't, but for the ones that thought he was. So there's all your moron soldiers again out there who saying, this is unconstitutional what President Trump's doing. They don't even know. Straight to the gallows they should go. Now, December the 7th, Executive Order 13961, which is your invocation of the continuity of government. 3 days later, Executive Order 13963 is your most recent order of succession within the Department of War, which is called the Department of Defense then. That one right there proves that quote-unquote Joe was not president alone. The most recent order of succession within the Department of War is President Donald John Trump, December the 10th, 2020. It's in all of our Department of Defense directives and instructions, which they hadn't changed that over to Department of War directives and Department of War instructions. It's the DOD I's and the DOD D's, still archived. President Trump, December the 14th, 2020. President Trump filed a court case through the state of Texas, which he's never lived in, via the United States Supreme Court versus the 7 battleground states, the 7 swing states. If you don't know, ladies and gentlemen, those swing states that you've always heard about in years past, those are where the deep state cheated. Those were the ones where they had a setup. That was the catches right there. That is the catch. All right. President Trump, that's why he bragged so much that we won the 7 battleground. He said it again the other day. We won the 7 swing states. Those are very key. All that disclosure is going to be in the future. You'll see that. What everything entailed. That's why the Executive Order 13848 with the National Emergency was continued again. It's not ready for disclosure. It will be there. President Trump, you can't say he was right about everything if you don't believe this is an operation. That's how he was right about everything. Because he was the name, face, the brand, the image that signed on to do this. This is the military operating. He's getting the credit for it because he was willing to take all the slanders, the low-level slanders, malicious, fraud, lies, everything. January the 1st, under the FCD1 and FCD2, they had publications come out. On January the 1st, one came out called Reconstitution of the Executive Branch. So see, 2017 to 2021 was the resetting of the legislative branch. That's why you just listen to all these unique laws and orders going into place. And that's just a few of them. This is just the military portion, I'm telling you. Go back and read all the others. All right. That was the resetting of the legislative branch. 2021 to 2025, that's when the government in exile, shadow government, puppet government, whatever you want to call it, was implemented. It's a strategy. It's a tactic. It's all lawful. All right? That's what you witnessed. Reconstitution means to take something from the state it's in and put it back in its original state. So they're telling you with this publication that we're about to go through an operation, a clean out of the executive branch, the cabinet, etc., reset everything. That's why you just recently saw President Trump show a photo of the new Oval Office, marble floors. When do you think they had time to do that? He just showed you a dining area that was put there. All during 2021 to 2025, everybody who went to D.C. and knows those federal employees were sent home. That's why President Trump called back the federal employees this January. Come back to D.C. Where were they? They were at home. That's why anybody who went to D.C., we told you, we had photos, we showed you all the scaffolds around there. We showed you all these things, right? And you kept saying, well, I got a cousin who went up there and they were doing a tour. They let your cousin tour where they could tour. See how that works? So, Reconstitution, January the 6th, this is where everybody, the liberals especially, they have their heads up their rear ends, all right? But they love licking their tonsils, all right? They love their stench of their rear end. Republicans, you had no idea what was going on because you don't know laws and orders. Title III, Section 15. For the first time in U.S. history, you witnessed 2 objections take place in the electoral count, and you didn't realize that the bigger picture, that this was all operational. All right, you didn't realize that. President Trump just put out the 274 FBI agents that were infiltrated in that quote-unquote crowd. All right, it's all coming out now. We've been talking about it, but especially me, been talking about this, showing you. It's all operational. What you witnessed that day was world history. 2 objections took place. And then what? They didn't do what was prescribed in Title 3, Section 15. You witnessed Title 18, which is federal crimes and criminal procedures, which is federal law, federal crimes. Title 18, Section 2381, 2384, 2385 broken right in front of you. You witnessed Title 3, Section 15 broken. And then you saw Title 52, Section 20511 broken right in front of you. That's what you witnessed. All those are seditious acts to overthrow the government because they went from California to Wyoming after Arizona to certify quote-unquote Joe. All right? It was all theater in another realm, but it wasn't from another angle because they were going to have distractions from 2021 to 2025. Well, they got it with the liberals. Boy, they took it hook, line, and sinker. Oh, that's an insurrection. You don't even know that one of our founders, Marquis de Lafayette, said that insurrection is one of the last line of defenses for saving your nation is an insurrection. All right, you probably need to know a little bit of our foundation or our history, if it would have been. All right, then that's when the National Guard, President Trump started sending in the National Guard to D.C. You heard all the stuff back then about, oh, Nancy Pelosi turned down National Guard. Nancy Pelosi has no military authority whatsoever. That was all distraction pieces. The only person who commands the D.C. National Guard is President Donald John Trump. Or the president, but in that time period was President Donald John Trump. Straight commander. But he also showed there were 50 states in one location, actually 51 because you had Puerto Rico, actually 52 because you had Guam. You had Guam and Puerto Rico all in one location in U.S. history. First time in U.S. history, all of our National Guard from every state and component were in one location at one time. And you think that was some old-ass white man who babbles like a toddler? Come on, people. Do better. You can do better than that. Ladies, an old white man, we've seen one person outside of, so Obama was your one different person of color, and then you had a few that were younger, but most of our history were what? Old white men. That wasn't historic, and it wasn't going to be enough for people to get mad about. Every conservative out there, when Obama was elected, if there was ever going to be a riot or a insurrection or whatever, it would have been for a black president. All right, since all the people out there are still calling white conservatives racist, well, if we were racist, we would have insurrected on a black president, not some old white dude. All right? I mean, the dang common sense in this nation leaves, you don't even need laws and orders to a level. The common sense in this nation and the logic is asinine. January the 12th, President Trump stood in Alamo, Texas. He made a speech down there that was very key. Alamo, Texas. That was a visual of days of old. All right? Where I'm sitting right now as I speak, I'm not terribly far from a certain place. All right? It's a hometown. One of the hometowns of William Barrett Travis, who was the hero of the Alamo. He was the commander of the Alamo in San Antonio at the actual Alamo. President Trump was standing in Alamo, Texas, but it had a correlation because it had a wall there, the wall, the border wall. All right? It had a double correlation, the line in the sand. That's what he was saying. And he said the next day that your grandchildren, your great, he did 7 great-grandchildren would live to talk about this day. An old white man being elected? The dash, baby. The dash. Alamo. William Barrett Travis, commander, 26 years old, and all those men died there at the Alamo. But William Barrett Travis drew a line in the sand. He told his men, if you step across this line, you're going to die right here because we're surrounded by Mexicans. We're not getting out of here alive. But they weren't going to raise the white flag. They weren't going to throw a white flag of surrender up. They were heroes. They died heroes. William Barrett Travis learned just enough Spanish. Little old Alabama boy learned enough Spanish that he was yelling, "No rendirse, muchachos. Give them hell, boys. Give them hell." Knowing they weren't getting out of there alive. And they unloaded. And they managed to take out quite a few Mexicanos. Right? They took out a load with what little ammo they had left before they were killed. He's the one who wrote a letter, victory or death. Most of the people in my comment boxes, you have no spine, no balls, no anything, like them people did. And you definitely don't have what I have. And I'm going to brag just a little bit. And I'm not the only one. But they're cut from a different cloth. And until every American starts treating yourself like that and acting like that, it's going to be hard to maintain and sustain with all the soft pansies we got out there. January the 17th, National Guard. More National Guard sent to D.C. again. January the 13th, President Trump amended Executive Order 13959 and Executive Order 13974, which was the one with the national emergency for freezing the assets. January the 18th, 2 days before what most Americans thought was President Trump leaving. No, but 2 days before, President Trump signed Executive Order 13977, which was a protection order for law enforcement, judges, prosecutors, and their families, which is telling you what's taking place all through that time. It was finding out what judges were going to stand for the laws and orders, not the propaganda and not the bought laws and orders. Not the deep state, what they want it to read, what they want it to be. January the 20th. Most beautiful thing on the planet Earth that you could ever see. So for all the libtards out there, if they thought it was real, they weren't yelling, "Why didn't our guy get a ride in Air Force One? Even the treason Obama got a ride in Air Force One to D.C." Quote-unquote Joe didn't receive the traditional flight into D.C. on Inauguration Day by Air Force One. Air Force One, not Trump Force One. Air Force One. All right, for layman's terms, that means the military don't recognize him. All right. 2, raised the right hand at 11:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, started the speech at 11:52 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, forever timestamp on whitehouse.gov archives. All right. All part of the movie, all part of theater, because they needed that day. It'll be accounted for. But that's a violation of the 20th Amendment of the Constitution, which specifically says the president's term shall end at noon. The successor shall then begin. Shall then means, okay, 1201 to 1205. I guess that's why every other president swore in United States history from 1201 to 1205 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They performed Amazing Grace. We couldn't even get, "Oh, happy day. Oh, happy day. When, na, na, na." We can't even get no happy song. Joe got a funeral song. Oh, quote-unquote Joe couldn't even get no happy song. We had a, "Oh, amazing grace, how sweet." I love this stuff, man. No review of the troops. The National Guard turned their backs on the quote-unquote motorcade, didn't even salute the commander-in-chief, the one who sat in his whitey-tighties in his basement eating his ice cream and got 81 million votes, record votes. Couldn't even get a salute by one single National Guard, one single soldier. The soldiers didn't even salute a moving flag. Wow. And then cannons. Army Regulation 600-25, 2-3 cannon salutes. There's to be a commissioned officer present at every cannon salute, don't matter what kind of salute it is. You'll see the commissioned officers with President Trump. 4 cannons, 21 rounds fired is a 21-gun salute by definition. 3rd Infantry Regiment, known as the Old Guard, fires the cannons. They're not artillery men, they're actually mortar men. All right? They do this year-round. This is all they do. They're the oldest unit in the United States Army, 1784. They didn't get this wrong, ladies and gentlemen. 4 cannons were with Joint Base Andrews with President Donald John Trump with a red carpet rollout. And the media told you that is a 21-gun salute. 21 rounds fired, 4 cannons, by definition. What they showed for quote-unquote Joe, the only cannon shown all day long, January the 20th, 2021 for quote-unquote Joe was 3 cannons at Arlington. Go to ArlingtonNationalCemetery.mil and it specifically tells you the 3 volley salutes seen or heard at Arlington is not to be confused with a 21-gun salute. The 3 volley salute is a military funeral honors. And just for the sake of, there was someone a couple years ago claimed they were in the Army, 20-something years. They said, oh, I finally caught Derek Jonhson lying. First off, you could be 100% wrong and not be a liar. But just because morons love that word, I like to use it. They said, the cannons are always at Arlington. The 3 cannons are always at Arlington. You're correct. But for the first time in United States history on Inauguration Day, they have never shown 3 cannons at Arlington. They've shown 4 cannons in a national capital region. See, so when you're trying so hard to prove someone wrong, all because of some personal agenda, you actually prove the operation correct. Because no time have they ever shown the cannons at Arlington on Inauguration Day. Moron. 2021 to 2025. All right, I'm just going to brush over a lot of them. This is going to be fun. So, quote-unquote Joe continued 8 executive orders with 8 national emergencies by President Donald John Trump. All of those are deporting illegal migrants. Weird. I thought President Trump was a dictator. Funded Doge. Did you know that quote-unquote Joe, for the people that thought he was real, on paper in the American Rescue Family Plan Act of 2021, funded Doge? The one that's cutting all the expenses in the in the federal government? And quote-unquote Joe. Hey, morons. Hey, moron soldiers. Making people think you're what? Taking back the Panama Canal. Did you know that we just sent 4,000 Marine Corps down to the Panama Canal? Did you see that article? Probably not. All right. Panama Canal, which is Executive Order 13936 from July the 14th, 2020. Hong Kong, because President Trump said it's not Panama controlling it, it's China. And then he said it more specifically, it's not just China, it's more specifically Hong Kong. There's one of those executive orders that quote-unquote Joe continued. One of the 8. Restricting telecommunications. Team Telecom. I mean, we can just keep going here. Tariffs. Remember in the debate, President Trump said, and did you notice he didn't take out my tariffs because he can't? And then President Trump says because they're too much money. See, what the average ear hears is that he couldn't take them out because they were bringing in too much money. Which still, either way, if President Trump is a dictator, a fascist, a terrorist, a threat to democracy, which we're not a democracy, Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution says we're not. If he's a threat to the Constitution and all these other things, then either way, why did quote-unquote Joe keep the tariffs in place? Either way you want to split that hair, goes back to, well, you still kept them in place. But you got to listen. It says because it can't. It's not because, oh, they're bringing in so much money. That was to distract you further until the disclosure of the end of 45-47 operation for the people who heard it that way. What President Trump just told you, he just told you a few days ago that I'm using the tariffs as a defense mechanism, which is an emergency power of a wartime president with wartime orders. But for all the ones still just, I'll just paint it every which way to Tulsa and back. Well, the tariffs. So in 2021 to 2023, for the people that thought, quote unquote, Joe was real, that don't know anything about a puppet government, government in exile, shadow government, special operations, unconventional warfare, civil affairs, don't know anything about that. Just for the average eye out there, they showed the world that a president of the United States was Democrat, had a Democrat-controlled House, and a Democrat-controlled Senate. From 2021 to 2025, quote-unquote, Joe didn't terminate one single tariff. From 2021 to 2025, not one single Obama, Clinton, or Bush-appointed judge tried to block a tariff. So why would Obama, Bush, and Clinton-appointed judges be trying to block a tariff now and calling them unconstitutional and a threat and all these things if they didn't block them from 2021 to 2025? Same judges. I mean, and from 2021 to 2023, an all-out Democrat, they couldn't terminate one single war order by President Donald John Trump. They didn't terminate one single Title 10, Title 32, any kind of proclamation with Title 10. 8 executive orders with 8 national emergencies. Every national emergency unlocks 120 statutory powers. Oh, man. The New York National Guard, Executive Order 28 by Governor Hochul. Federal support. The Adjutant General puts out a report in 23, 24 that there were 2,800, 7,600 National Guard on active duty, federal support, not a single Title 10 or Title 32 order in place by quote-unquote Joe. Oh, man, I love this stuff. Title 42, May the 11th, 2023, Title 42. They try to tell you that, quote-unquote, the mainstream media try to tell you that, quote-unquote, Joe terminated that. No, it didn't. It expired. They didn't need it anymore. It wasn't no termination. It's all part of the operation. Then you had, quote-unquote, Joe at a press conference. A reporter was asking a question. I still have it. It's like a 4-minute interview. He said, oh, you talking about the border thing? Yeah, well, I told him to send me a bill. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're president, you don't need a bill or an act with the border, especially. President Trump called up the border. Shut it down. Bam. Closed. You don't have to like it. The whole nation, even Republicans, conservatives, the whole nation could be against the president. And he could call and say, shut it down. See, this is people who don't even know how the executive branch functions and operates, how legislation functions and operates, and how the judicial branch functions and operates. And they're all separate. They all have their, but that's not what they did in the past from 2016 all the way back. You could go back to Lyndon Johnson. You can go further than that, but Lyndon Johnson's a great starting point to show the real deep state where it got really muddy. Guantanamo Bay. Quote-unquote Joe never got rid of Executive Order 13823. The reason why I bring that up also is the St. Croix. Every quote-unquote vacation they showed Joe Biden take for Christmas was at St. Croix. You know what we have at St. Croix, ladies and gentlemen? Courthouse that ties into Guantanamo Bay. I love this crap, man. This stuff's so much fun. Every year for Christmas, quote-unquote Joe went to St. Croix. They couldn't put a more beautiful visual out there for every one of you patriots who are tracking, fully tracking, knows what's going on. That was like your cherry on top every time. Saying, hey, baby, rejuvenate. We just keep going. It ain't over. Visuals ain't over. Disclosure not here yet. 45-47 still going. Just hang tight. That was your validation. Then you had quote-unquote Joe in an interview somewhere, and he said what? He was talking about President Trump. He said, can you believe he said that? The sitting president. They had quote-unquote Joe say, call President Trump the sitting president. Because he was. A wartime president. Then I'm just bouncing around here. I'm just going to go through bouncing around some of these. All right. When quote-unquote Biden did his farewell for the nation. Farewell for the nation. He said, I'm proud to say I'm the first president to not have any troops anywhere in any combat zone. And then you saw that video of actual troops in Iraq or Afghanistan. I can't remember where they were, but they had this video, and you can tell they're legit military. I can tell you for a fact they're legit military. Their uniforms are all exactly what they are, uniform. And they go, where the F are we then? You know, and then they're all laughing and cutting up. All right, so that's one little thing. Also, you saw during the same time period, you saw an aircraft have have to eject and all these other things, and then different operations going on. That's all combat. Like it's all anyway. I could go on about all the visuals during that time period. All right, then you had old John Bolton that President Trump removed all his security clearance, and you're seeing all the stuff going on with him right now in the news, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's already been done. But way back in February 2024, he was asked a question on CNN. He was asked the question, could President Trump serve a second term with all of these quote-unquote lawsuits against him? You got to listen to him. He said, well, the Constitution right now specifically bans the president from a third term, but knowing Trump like I know him, he's going to seek to ratify the Constitution to expand that. Well, 1951 is when Congress put term limits on the president. All right. Well, President Trump right now, all of the media is talking about a ratification. It's talking about a convention. 27 states, you only need 34. All right. Civil affairs, psychological operations. There were three things that were consistent all throughout 2021 to 2025 to show you that it was all a military operation. All right, but you got to know what? Military laws, military orders, military strategies, military tactics, military regulations, military customs, executive orders, national emergencies, proclamations, treaties. You got to know everything military. Those headbands you saw with January the 20th, 2017, President Trump, military intel, Judge Advocate General, will add one more. Every time they showed quote-unquote Joe somewhere, you saw one of three headbands showing you all consistent with President Donald John Trump. Government exile, public government. You saw military intelligence, Judge Advocate General. And the next one sounds like two, but it's one. Civil affairs and psychological operations. Civil affairs is a puppet government. When you have evidence of a military occupation, wartime orders restricting telecommunications, restricting or regulating commerce, there's all these things that show you the wartime orders being invoked, being enforced. Therefore, when you have those, you can apply civil affairs, and then all the things that were fake around quote-unquote Joe prove that that's the civil affairs. Because the military around quote-unquote Joe wasn't real. All right? That's why he walked down to the ass end of the plane every time. I've had people go, that's the front, the belly. No, it's not. It's called the ass. When Obama flew to China one time, all your mainstream articles read that he was disgraced, it was disrespectful, they didn't have the tarmac prepared, and Obama had to walk out of the ass of the plane. Every time they showed quote-unquote Joe, guess where he was walking out? The ass of the plane. All right. Then, every time you saw President Donald John Trump throughout this time period, you saw him in a few races, he was saluting the flag. Ladies and gentlemen, if President Trump was a former president, well, he wasn't a veteran before. Just because you become president, that don't exempt you to be able to salute when you're done with presidency. So if he'd have been a former president, because he wasn't a veteran before, he can't salute the flag. That's only done when you're a president in office. Because at the moment, you're serving as a president and also commander-in-chief. When you're done with your service, but you weren't a veteran before, you go back to hand over heart. That alone right there, that would have lost the veteran community straight out. And the liberals out there, and the libtard veterans, and the traitor veterans, because they don't know all the laws and orders invoked, the 45-47, some of them already think that. And they show their colors. All right. Also to show that it was a civil affairs. During the quote-unquote debate with Joe, President Trump said what? He said all he had to do was keep everything in place. All he had to do was leave it alone. I gave you virtually no inflation. I gave you 1%, which is perfect. Economists say it's perfect. That was a verbal validation of, I'm a wartime president in charge of the military. This is a puppet government, civil affairs. The most popular one my grandfather served through in 43 to 45 in the Army was the Second Philippine Republic, where Roosevelt pulled in because President Quezon of the Philippines capitulated to him, brought his military. He came to D.C. and stayed in D.C. Roosevelt had full control of the Filipino military. Japan installed a fake president in Philippines who met with the press, and some of the people back then thought he was real. But in the end, and the bigger picture for humanity, Quezon knew it would come out, and it would all would be well, as the saying was. Straight up, puppet government. That's what they call them, puppet government, puppet states. February this year, in a press conference, the little reporter asked President Trump, we're still in the continuity of government, we're still in the military occupation, which means we're still in an operation, but the reporter asked President Trump about a capitulation and a puppet government in Russia. Those are not government terms, ladies and gentlemen. Puppet government, occupied country, white flag of surrender, capitulation are law war manual terms. Puppet government and occupied country are in the same chapter in the law war manual. Military occupation. I've already covered the December 2021 Team Telecom, that quote-unquote Joe, that was Executive Order 13913. All right. Another one that showed you. Quote-unquote Joe and quote-unquote Jill go to the Queen's funeral. They were sitting 14 rows back. If that were the president of the United States of America, they wouldn't be sitting 14 rows back there with the people who ain't even a cousin. Back there with the regular audience. You ever go to a funeral? It's always your first family first, right? Mom and daddy on front row, husband, spouse, whatever. And it works its way back. Oh, quote unquote, Joe and Jill back there sitting back with the people who are going, I'm just here to see if they really died. They're back there with the regular schmucks. Did they really die? Is that really them? Can you see her face in that casket? Does that really hurt? Guess what we didn't get with Charlie Kirk? We didn't even get to see if it was really him. Is that? Why they got it closed? Why they got it closed? Why can't we see that thing? And then we didn't even see a funeral. We didn't even see a burial place. Didn't even see a resting place. Just. All right. Then you had the unknown soldier salute. So when you see a video with the unknown soldier, when they show quote unquote Joe at the unknown soldier, every bit of everything's off there. Order arms. When there's before they even say order arms, quote unquote Joe and all of them are moving their arms up. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to us people who've been in the military, please. Please. Even if you're slow, you wait till after order arms. You wouldn't be doing it before in the middle. Order arms. Please, people, for the sake of the memorial graves out there that cannot speak for themselves, that we wear these wristbands for, please listen to us, veterans. Please. Go watch President Trump at the unknown soldier. Order arms. No, they don't all have to be at the same time because they're not typical uniformed soldiers. So if the president and the vice president are a little off, doesn't matter. Long as it's after the order arms. You got to pay attention to details. They show you so much that shows you you're watching an operation. But the good thing is I know you're going to see disclosure down the road. So all I got to do, and all the good, faithful patriots out there, but especially veterans, doing what we're supposed to be doing, and all the operators, etc., secret military, etc., just got to wait it out. We know what's coming. All right. Marine Corps. Come on, devil dogs. Come on, you devil dogs. You hoorah. Come on now. Don't go Full Metal Jacket on me here. Come on, devil dogs. Marine Corps. They showed, quote unquote, Joe, the Marine Corps around him. They showed these dudes in flight suits that look like the Air Force with patrol caps on, like your Digicam patrol cap with a flight suit. Come on, Marine Corps. They put that really right in front of you. That wouldn't even require the nastiest crayon out of all the crayons, probably the brown one, because it's like doo-doo. You wouldn't even need a fuchsia color crayon. You wouldn't even need the brown crayon. That alone, every Marine Corps in this nation, you should have known right then. If you didn't know before, that should have been like, that is not regulation. And one of them, in his crotch region near his ham candle behind the flight suit looking thing, it looks like the crater you'd see on the moon at night. All right? For all of you out there with a little dark humor, or the other kind of humor, his crotch section looked like Jennifer Aniston. Come on, people. Have some fun with this. You're watching a movie with a special operation, strategic operation. All right? They didn't show, quote-unquote, Joe at the Army-Navy game. All right? Now, only one other president, I believe, and I can't remember which one it was. I may have been Ford, but didn't go to the Army-Navy game. However, they told you that, quote-unquote, Joe was a high school standout player. football player. And he didn't go to one single Army-Navy game. If you love football, ladies and gentlemen, and most people do who played it, like I did and my dad did in high school, when you love the game, whether you played for 1 year, 4 years, whatever, however long, when you love the game, you go into a game like that. Especially when you're the quote-unquote commander-in-chief. But he wasn't. The national security strategy. Quote-unquote Joe was the first quote-unquote president in United States history not to have a single order of succession within any military domain. Department of War, National Security Council. It's very important, ladies and gentlemen. Very important. The order of succession is more important than the memorandums. So how could quote-unquote Joe have national security memorandums put no order of succession? How could he meet with the generals and the admirals when he don't even have an order of succession? That one alone is very clear. All right? There were 0 reports on Iran from quote-unquote Joe in 2021, 2022, 2023. The most recent would have been December 2024 by quote-unquote Joe. So he would wait till 28 days before the end of quote-unquote presidency for him to finally issue a report on Iran when all of the NDAAs had Iran in them. NDAAs are Congress. President Trump had 4 reports on Iran. Obama had like 20. But quote-unquote Joe would wait 4 weeks before he would quote-unquote pass the baton back to President Donald John Trump. Come on, people. From April 2024 to December 2024, President Trump met with 12 foreign leaders 13 different times at Mar-a-Lago and Trump Towers. So, during the 2020 debate, President Trump said, Joe, it was you, Joe, you recommended the Logan Act on General Michael Flynn. It was you, Joe, who told Obama about the Logan Act. They used the Logan Act on General Michael Flynn for meeting with one person. The Logan Act specifically says private correspondence with a foreign leader. It's under Title 18, which is federal crime again, federal crimes and criminal procedures. You don't think that if the Democrats and liberals would have had that kind of solid evidence on President Donald John Trump meeting with 12 foreign leaders 13 different times from April to December, that they wouldn't have used the Logan Act on President Trump when it was all public and visual? It was all over the news. President Trump even had press conferences. Now the big ones. Israel. October the 7th, 2023. October the 7th, 2023, just so happens the Special Operations Command puts out a publication called Renaissance. And inside there, it's got the letter from April the 11th, 1962 by President Kennedy about guerrilla warfare. Where when the good guys are in control of it, that's what we need to do. With all these unique, unconventional, strategic, clandestine, covert, operation tactics, strategies, etc., to always stay on top, stay diligent, but stay on top of the enemy. Who was assassinated again after that letter? So that, what? On the government side got pushed under the rug? You don't think the military forgot about that, ladies and gentlemen? You don't think the military didn't start devising a plan? But because the swamp was so deep and thick, shoo, woo, and then all the thick skulls by the Americans out there, shoo, woo. October the 7th, they also showed you, 2023, that the quote-unquote Israel war started. During that time period, they had quote-unquote Kamala, all right, tell that no American troops were going to be in Israel. Well, why do I have aircraft, United States aircraft, in and out of Israel before that time period and after that speech? Why did we have boots on the ground in Israel during that time period? In 1 week's time, ladies and gentlemen, in 1 week's time, from October the 7th to October the 14th, all of these nations were in Israel in 1 week's time. United States, Canada, Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Nigeria, Algeria, Tunisia, Romania, Thailand, Japan, Sweden, Germany, Belgium, Hungary, Ukraine, Russia. I can keep going. New Zealand, Australia, Russia and Ukraine? I thought they were supposed to be in a quote-unquote war. All in 1 week's time. All time-stamped. I got them all time-stamped. All in my phone. All posted on Telegram, Facebook, etc. 1 week's time. That ties in with your subterranean warfare from May 2019, $572 million. What did they tell you in November and December of 2023? That the war went where? The war has now gone to the tunnels, underground. Tunnel warfare, subterranean warfare. Texas, 2024. February. Same month that John Bolton talked about President Trump's third term, 14 states deployed to Texas under Proclamation 9844 from February the 5th, 2019. Who was the president again? And President Donald John Trump is standing on stage with the governor of Texas and the adjutant general. And he specifically said it's a military operation twice. He also walked in a FOB, what we call a forward operating base, a FOB. At ease! You don't at ease a former commander, ladies and gentlemen. If he was a presidential candidate, one, that would have been a breach of national security because it was an operation. Two, it would have been a violation of his own Executive Order 13848 with the national emergency. Four, election interference if, quote-unquote, Joe was a sitting president. Then that would have made President Donald John Trump, former Donald, if you thought that, it would have made him a hypocrite. It would have made him a hypocrite if he was a former. You don't at ease a former president. You don't at ease a former commander. You wouldn't even have the former president in a forward operating base. February 2024, 14 states, before and after that date in Texas. The one that gives it away is the adjutant general. The adjutant general reports to the governor, as the state chief executive, the governor, unless the National Guard are federalized by Title 10. The only Title 10 order in place for those troops to be at the border was Proclamation 9844, February 2019, and if the reserves were used, March 27, 2020, Executive Order 13912, Title 10, Section 12302. So every soldier out there who's saying these are unconstitutional, they don't have a clue what they're talking about. They're in service for the wrong reasons. They're there for their own personal status, their personal gain, in and out of the military. They treat their privileges as rights, not privileges. Every veteran who says that also didn't know why they served, don't know anything about military laws and federal, how they pair. $2025, January the 19th, they did this on purpose to show you a clear separation, but also a clear validation. On January the 19th, they showed President Trump at Arlington. Did you see cannons at Arlington? No, you didn't. So see, like that person 2 years ago who tried to, get a following or whatever it was, the Army person that didn't know anything about Army regulations, etc. All of a sudden, they showed President Trump at Arlington on January the 19th, 2025, when every other time they've shown a president swear in, it was after that they went to Arlington. This time they did it the day before. And guess what was not seen at Arlington? The cannons. There was only one set of cannons shown on January the 20th for President Donald John Trump, as did every other president from 2017 to 1969 that you can find on YouTube. Which means that quote-unquote Joe is an outlier in history for all you Nimrods who keep wanting to argue about it. Means that he's the only person seen with two different sets of cannons on January the 20th. One was with President Donald John Trump. The other was at Arlington, which is a clear military funeral. January the 19th, no cannons shown at all. Watch and listen to the commands. January the 20th, you saw awkwardly Eric Trump off to the side because President Trump had other things he was doing. It would have really been obvious. But you see Eric Trump off to the side holding his hands up like this. Spearhead. Special Operations. See how that works? Spearhead. Any Nimrod out there calling that Illuminati? If it's a male, slap them. Ladies, slap the ever living dog shit out of them. Every time you see President Trump in a meeting, tip of the spear. It's a verbal proclamation that what you're watching is an operation. Any moron out there that says that is a resting position, that's a... Morons. This is not a resting position. This is a resting position. This requires thought process. And anybody who says that, you're just disrespecting Special Operations Command. You're disrespecting every special operator, secret military, veteran, reserve, active duty, National Guard. Doesn't matter. You're disrespecting that. Because you choose to be complacent, you choose to be lazy, you choose to tickle your fancy on what you think you know, which you actually don't know. Jack diddly squat. Every meeting, President Trump. Then off to the side over here on January the 20th, 2025 is Eric with his hands up like that. Laura looking over like that. Boop. Everything is timestamped proclamation. Every intricate detail. There's no loopholes. Everything. California. The National Guard and Marine Corps. You got morons out there saying that's unconstitutional. No, it's not. Joint Publication 3-57. Every one of these laws have been in place long before 2016. The laws. The orders have not. The laws have. So therefore, if it's unconstitutional, then that means the law should have been abolished long before any president enforced it. Or Congress, depending on what it is. Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550 that we discussed December the 20th, 2019, Title 50 is Congress. That's not the president. Writ of habeas corpus. Suspending the writ of habeas corpus, which they call suspending the Constitution, but suspending writ of habeas. That's Article 1. That's the legislative branch. That's not Article 2. That's not presidential. You just got to know a few little things here. It's not that difficult. Joint Publication 3-57 on page 46. It specifically says, no, generally you don't want Title 10, Department of War, Department of Defense, forces on the streets, direct involvement with law enforcement. Generally. And it says, but what? It says, unless the Constitution or Congress deems so. There you go. Well, Congress deemed so with the National Defense Authorization Act way back in 2020. Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550. There's your bipartisan. Guess what it was? Guess who introduced it? A Democratic House under President Trump. Democrat-controlled House Representatives. Republican Senate are the ones who passed that NDAA of 2020 that all of these things are operating under. That's why any person, veteran or someone posing as in uniform right now who says anything's unconstitutional is an outright traitor, moron, and they should deserve every penalty and punishment they should receive if they're real. Venezuelan strikes, we talked about that a while ago. All these strikes you're seeing with Venezuela. First off, Venezuela is an executive order by whom? Barack Hussein Obama. You've heard President Trump recently say, I've ended 7 wars in 7 months. Guess what every one of those executive orders are from? 2016 and prior. Every bit of them. Iran was 1979. This is why it pays, ladies and gentlemen, to know laws and orders. That executive order with the national mercy, Jimmy Carter. Iran. So all these nations who didn't capitulate to President Trump in 2017 and 2020, which makes up the operation, special operation, strategic operation, the 45-47, Iran obviously didn't capitulate. Venezuela obviously didn't capitulate. But guess whose orders they are? Deep state. President Trump's having to clean it up. So anything he does is constitutional, and it should have never been an executive order with a national emergency in the first place. That's how you solve that. That's how you shut up a moron that's arguing with you. Because you can't say laws and orders when it was their people who issued those. And they were going to do what? Drag them out like they've been doing. That's why President Trump said we're ending defense contracts and lobbyists, because all they do is make excuses to keep us in wars. Bingo. There you go. I covered it, but I'll cover it again. The United Nations comment that President Trump said, I'm using tariffs as a defense. Straight up emergency power right there. The emergency powers of a president: regulating commerce, restricting telecommunications, deploying military. There's a few of them. There's more than that, but that's a few big ones. Bingo. We covered it. Not one single judge tried to block a tariff from 2021 to 2025. Quote unquote, Joe didn't terminate one single tariff from 2021 to 2025. And then also it was displayed to the public who thought, quote unquote, Joe was real. 2021 to 2023, Democrat president, Democrat House, Democrat Senate. Not one single war order, Title 10, Title 32, executive order with a national mercy. They were all handed right back to President Donald John Trump, January the 20th, 2025. Therefore, eliminating any kind of argument, any kind of whatever out there by morons or whoever about it being a dictator, fascist, anything. If, quote-unquote, Joe was president, he should have terminated every single thing, which shows you're watching an operation, because the laws and orders outline that. Marine One. So you have Marine One. Here's another, shows you. Marine One, new Marine Ones. There's new Air Force Ones. They're not in use yet, not those, but new Marine Ones are. They say operational status, green. You think President Trump will let, quote-unquote, Joe one-up him? I mean, look, I've been to Mar-a-Lago. I've been to Trump's Route. I've been to Trump International. I've been there multiple times. It's immaculate. Exquisite, elegant, whatever words you want to use. For male terms, dapper, whatever you want to use. It's there. But it's more elegant for females than it is dapper for males. It's beautiful. Words can't describe it. President Trump rolls around. When's the last time he even was in a vehicle outside of the beast, right? We don't know that. Rolls-Royce engines on Trump Force One. You think he would be in the old Marine One? Because that's what they showed you, going to the Charlie Kirk funeral with no casket, the quote-unquote funeral with no burial, the funeral with no resting place. He gets on old Marine One. It also showed in United Kingdom having to make an emergency landing. You think he'd be rolling around on the old Marine One when there's new ones? I don't think so. That's the movie. That's the stuff they give you on TV. That's for the normies. If you're not a normie, you shouldn't be reacting to it. If you're reacting to it, it should be happy. Going, there's new Marine Ones. I saw the new Marine One that Dan Scavino posted at the United Nations. So it shows the new Marine One is there. So why would quote-unquote Joe, because why would quote-unquote Joe get to August, it was August 2024, where quote-unquote Joe took the inaugural flight in Marine One, the new one. No. President Trump would not let quote-unquote Joe one-up him on something military. But the laws and orders show what's in place. So it's not about one-upping anybody, it just shows you. President Trump issued a new national security memorandum not just a couple of days ago. So President Trump has National Security Memorandum, Order of Succession, National Security Memorandum, Order of Succession, January 28, 2017, and February the 4th, 2025. But quote-unquote Joe don't have a single Order of Succession with National Security. Memorandums are lower than Order of Successions, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Restricting telecommunications. I'm going to tie this in again. So, everything to do with the quote-unquote Charlie Kirk, straight up operational, has something to do with the bigger picture. Now, even when you're secret military, even when you're an operator, even when you're special operations, whatever you are, whatever layer you are, don't mean you know the bigger picture. I'm not in the command room. I can't see the command room. I don't know the command room. I take everything as they give it to you. That's why they put me in my place. I can take all these laws and orders, all the military laws and orders, all the military operations, the joint publications, etc., and show you the visuals once they give it to you and tie it into that. But every operator on certain levels, just because you don't know that bigger picture of what it's going to, I know what the bigger picture is going to go to in the sense of what it's cleaning out, but what they're using to get there, no one knows that except the high command room, and it's a little bitty room with not that many people. All right, they put us all in our positions doing what we're supposed to be doing and helping you where we are. Some things you just need to just sit back, relax, and let it play out. But I can assure you that Charlie Kirk, the whole thing was part of a special operation. Turning Point, the name is specific and strategic already because every war has a line in the sand, Alamo. Every war has a turning point. All right. Now, President Trump was speaking last year, all right, out there on the rally, and he told the liberals went stir crazy. The low-level liberals went stir crazy with it. Said, Christians, get out and vote. You won't ever have to vote again. Just this once. Get out. He was stressing the importance of that election, all right, and then also what that ties into, Executive Order 13848 with the national emergency and all the National Guard who are out there collecting data that's going to be presented to you down the road when they're ready for it, and all the stuff, how they're going to tie it in for the grand finale, all right, has to do with that. The liberals took it and went stir crazy with it, but guess where he was speaking at? Well, guess what took place September 21st? A funeral with no casket. And all the target audience fell for it because they're the target audience. Right? But if you're a divorce your emotions, divorce your feelings, you'll see all things about this was nothing was authentic, nothing was genuine, nothing was real. And it's not to play on your emotions. It's not to upset you. It's supposed to make you happy and go, oh my God, there's an operation going on. But what are the target audience doing? Reacting negatively, thinking that I have something against Charlie Kirk. And I'm not acting as a single person. I'm acting as a team here with other operators and other people doing what we're supposed to be doing, what we're tasked to do. And people are, divorce your emotions, divorce your feelings. Take all these things and you'll see how all this ties into the dash. All right? So you got to look at the events all around. President Trump has signed 6 executive orders in 2025 alone for artificial intelligence. Then he has a presidential memoranda that he just signed on the 28th, which would have been after the visuals of what you saw on September the 10th, that they wanted you to see for a reason, which was all fake. It was all AI. Wasn't even real. It's not real. All right? So, 6 executive orders in 2025 alone for artificial intelligence, a presidential memoranda after September the 10th for artificial intelligence, and he has one in 2019 and one in 2020. Now, tying in your executive order 13913 for your federal communications, right? FCC, Team Telecom, restricting telecommunications. Ladies and gentlemen, you could say the worst thing possible, and I don't want to make a scenario out there because some moron I take it as a clip and go say I said this and I didn't, but you could say the most atrocious thing about anybody that's a political figure, icon, whatever you want to call it, but let's just use one of your favorites out there. I could say the most atrocious thing about them. Now, you don't have to like me. You don't have to like that I said it. You can be disgusted that I said it, but you cannot fire me for saying that. Can't. That's called freedom of expression, freedom of speech. The only way you can fire somebody over freedom of speech is in a wartime order by the military. In a military occupation, military operation, continuity government. Special operation, because that's the unconventional warfare, that's your revolution, that's your pyramid of the revolution. That's exactly what the pyramid says in the Unconventional Warfare Pocket Guide from April 2016, the new one. And it ties into 47 United States Code Section 606, which is the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which ties into your FCC, which ties into Team Telecom, which ties into Executive Order 13913, which ties into 1798 Aliens Act. All right, ties into that too. All these things tie in together. So if you failed for the visuals because of emotions and feelings on September the 10th, because you love Charlie, rightfully so, liked him, rightfully so, whatever it is that you love, there's always a bigger picture. You got to divorce your feelings and your emotions and see the bigger picture. Then there's cases out there of people that you fall for, like the swamp. See, because you're Republican, and it's a Republican, you just, hook, line, and sinker. And it could be someone like Mitt Romney. It could have been someone like Paul Ryan. It could have been someone that President Trump's already given a nickname that was a traitor, that was a rhino. And you fall hook, line, and sinker because you can't divorce your feelings and your emotions. They say all the right things, yeah, because that's how they get you. They say all the right things. They do all the right things to you visually. That old saying, looks like a duck, walks like a duck, talks like a duck, acts like a duck, might be a duck. Well, the way you differentiate is someone like me. I've been consistent for 3 years now, visual to you. I provide nothing but laws and orders that outline the foundation, the Constitution, our Declaration, etc. Federalist Papers, all those. You haven't seen me riding around those Rolls Royce. Not that I guess it's bad, but you ain't seen me go from dirt poor to the Rolls Royce. You ain't seen me change. I see, now, could I be? Yeah, I could be sitting here going, get out of this and go get something. But that could still just be style, right? So the only way you can be consistent is to be what? Consistent. Until proven. If I die, and they go, well, yep, he was consistent all the way through. That's with everybody. But there's a lot of people that you have put up on a pedestal that may not be good. I don't know all of them, but I'm just telling you to be open, to be precautious that some of these people that you worship and love might have had something back here. I'm not saying that about him in particular. I'm just using that during this scenario, building what I'm going to show you that ties all this in to present day, from 2015 to present day. You got to be careful. Because in a military operation, they already know who is and who ain't. And then there's certain things that do most certainly outline the emergency powers that I've outlined that you can visually see, and then you hear President Trump telling you occupied territory, country, white flag of surrender, public government, capitulation. Well, those are all law war manual terms. They're not government. Then there's evidence showing you. He told you we're an occupied country. We will soon no longer be. The Great Liberation starts on November the 5th, 2024, and the Great Restoration starts January the 20th. Restoration means restoring the laws and orders back. And they're doing that slowly. But we're still in a partial continuity government. So you got to be careful, because everything they showed you on the 10th, visually, optically, and comm-wise, all not real whatsoever. This is a 30-06. This is a 30-06 bullet right here, ladies and gentlemen. 30-06. I shoot a 30-06 and I shoot a 7mm Magnum. The 7 mag has has a smaller lead and a bigger casing for more gunpowder. This 30-06 though, depending on, this is 180 grain, so it's about 2,800 feet a second. You can get a smaller grain, and it'll probably go about 3,200 feet a second. My 7mm Magnum will go about 3,800 feet a second, depending on the grain of bullet. Either way you want to do that, we just take an average of those. That's a half a mile in a second, ladies and gentlemen. When they tell you that the media told you that day that it was 200 yards within an hour, how did they know that when they didn't even have a shooter or a location? The media was already telling you 200 yards. At 200 yards, it's 30-06. When it hits a deer, they're going to sit down. Also, when deer get shot, it's unexpected. They don't know it. And sometimes the longer the shot, the deer can already hear they can hear that. So sometimes you'll see on video, if you'll go watch YouTube hunting videos when someone shoots, you'll see the deer jumping back out, like doing like this. Because they don't realize they've already been hit. They're hearing the sound. They've already been hit long before the sound. And they're going back this way. Like the bullet's coming here, this way. If it's coming here, this way. Old quote-unquote Charlie leaned into it. That's a squib, ladies and gentlemen. It's all artificial. It's all fake. The blood on screen was artificial. All right? That day, they did an impact, but most of that audience, central casting. President Trump told you day one, central casting, he said central casting I don't know how many times. The next day, on the set, they had Charlie's executive producer and all them. He's not much of a central casting kind of guy. They solidify the operation with optics and comms, and then also just knowing simple, this thing right here, I highly suggest you, even if you have a weak stomach, I highly suggest you take your rear end over to Google, type in 30-06, 30.06, gunshot wound to human neck or deer. It's going to pop up all these images, and it's going to say graphic content on all of them. Click on it. Shut your mouth. Click on it. This right here would have ripped his freaking neck off. At 6'5", 200 and whatever, 30-something pounds, whatever. He wouldn't have been sitting in an armless chair either. All right, elevated on a platform. I've already shown all this stuff. His chair is elevated on a platform under the tent. All right, the shooter would have had to been able to see over that crowd, down in that. It was elevated. It goes up from where you see it under a tent. So it's in the middle of a tent, which had an awning on it, a frontage on it, and they say the shooter was up 200 yards over the audience on this building, and this guy sitting halfway under the tent. No way. A 22-year-old pipsqueak, one shot, and then you got OAN or TPS, Turning Point USA telling people that the surgeon said that, this one shot, that his body stopped from other people getting hurt. How? It was one shot. One bullet. They're talking metaphorically. They're talking towards the target audience. When they unveil all this, there's going to be such a revelation party that when this is all said and done, you're going to see the bigger picture. Then you're going to remember President Trump way back there in 2024. Guess what that audience was he told Christians? To go vote. He had just given data that Christians don't vote and gun owners don't vote. The very people who claim that they love President Trump don't even go vote for their own rights. He was at Turning Point USA when he gave that speech. I bet y'all asses going to be voting now, aren't you? Yeah, target audience. I bet you're going to vote now. See, everything has a strategic operation. Everything has a bigger picture. And God forbid someone could risk their platform to save humanity if that's what it plays out that CK did. Could be doing something else. You got to have every option open. That's how you divorce your emotions and divorce your feelings, and that's why you don't ever have any upsets in your heart or disappointments with people that you put so high on a pedestal that God forbid they could do any wrong. We're all human. People are subject to do something. Little, middle, big. And everything has a what? Humiliation and a punishment for it. You try to do your best, you should do your best. No way Jose did a 22-year-old that one shot didn't save other people from getting hurt. If he'd have rung off any other, if that would have been real and other bullets would have been fired and they didn't hit anything, okay, you can make that comment. But they put this stuff so right in front of everybody, telling you it's not real, but it's not a lie. It's also not a play on your emotions the other way. See, the people who think like that don't know anything about this right here. 45-47, all the laws and orders we just laid out. So executive orders show artificial intelligence. Then the visuals that day, boop, hits the neck. You got some meathead out there claiming he's a Marine Corps veteran sniper. The moron don't even know that a 30-06, if you're a sniper, you'll know that a 30-06, whether you thought that was the entrance or the exit, it would have ripped the neck off. It wouldn't have looked like that. So see, that's why you got to be careful who you listen to out there, ladies and gentlemen, because old Marine Corps don't even know the laws and orders that are invoked around all this. It even outlines and shows you that. But also the visuals of that exit or entrance wound, it would have been way bigger than that. I put a photo up on Facebook and X. I got censored for graphic content for showing a photo of a deer exit wound, entrance and exit wound. But the actual original footage from September the 10th to this day on my Facebook and X are not censored for graphic content, which tells you it's fake. It's not real. If they'll censor a deer shot where I zoomed in, where you really can't really tell what it is, I just tell you what it is in the comment. It's because blood, the coloration, and how they coded that in their systems of coding, the coloration is what gives away that it's real blood or not. So the coloration on the original footage from September 10th is telling these coding systems on the internet it's not real blood. That's why it flags a deer, not the whole deer, but just the shot, because the coloration is showing that's real blood. See, this is why people with technology, you ain't got to be an expert in technology to know the general function of it. "6'5" ain't gonna sit in no chair getting shot in the jugular by a 30-06. Dead weight, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of you never mess with dead weight, therefore you don't know about it. But dead weight, nope. 6'5" on a chair with no arms, or at least if a miracle happened and did sit in the chair with no, then you would go back like this. You wouldn't, your nerves with a jugular shot with a 30-06, you wouldn't be holding the microphone up here. Your nerves, your brain would be telling your arm to hold the microphone up next to your head, which means above here, all right? There's a stat out there, maybe some of you medical people can say this, but there's something out there that says that, you know, like when your head's hurting and you give yourself a massage, it don't feel as good as someone else doing that, but when you scratch your leg, it feels great. It says everything above your, like here, like this, your nerves are working maybe extra, whatever it is, that it don't feel good like that. So think about that. He's holding the microphone up in a jugular shot, which would take you out. It'd be lights out, bye-bye. It'd have been the polar opposite of going to sleep at night and dying in your sleep. It may look painful, but a jugular shot, you're decommissioned quick. You're going to bleed out. Gone. See ya. You won't even know. You'd have been like that. Not leaning into the shot, holding the microphone up like that. You wouldn't have held the microphone up like that. Sitting in a chair with no arms. Then it showed the fake blood. It never went past the chest. Ever. All right? Didn't go past the chest. Then if you slow the video down, do a video recording of it, slow it down, there's blood splattering horizontally. How can it splatter horizontally when it's not even hitting anything? It don't stain the shirt, saturate the shirt, nothing. We can't be this dumb, America. We can't sustain and maintain a future looking this atrocious, America. Then the video that David Harris Jr., who goes on OAN and some of your favorites out there, puts the side video up on his page. So big blue badge person, big authentic person, puts the video up. Where's the blood? So from the quote-unquote front view that they didn't censor, that they let circulate to all your phones and TV and everything, the front view of the only authentic original footage all over mainstream media, the front shows it coming out pouring like this, which would have looked like a water fountain. On the side view, if that was pouring out like a water fountain, then the side view, you should see it going out the side like that. No blood. Audience central casting. TV had to show you the visual effects of him and the squib hitting him. Right? Bam. Like that. Leaning into it. Bam. His shirt was already out like that. First off. The mark went from here to here to here to here. No saturation. No blood. No stain. Slow it down. Blood's going horizontally. Just so happens there'd be a hatch door right to the left that goes underground. All right, then you see the side view, the chair go through the table. So the chair that he was sitting on, elevated on the platform, that's seen at other tour dates that he had been on, that chair mysteriously goes through the table on the original footage, on media. When you slow it down, video stream it, goes through it. Then you see no blood on the shirt. Slow it down. When you see these quote-unquote security guys, one of them was on his phone behind him the whole time. When you're on detail like that, ladies and gentlemen, with a high profile, you're not on your phone as a security person whatsoever, sitting there chilling, looking at your Bumble dates and your Tinder dates, where you are on your location. All right? Ain't happening. All right? Then it shows them working on him, and the chair goes to the table and all this other stuff. A dude's head goes through the camera, mysteriously goes through the camera, all right? Just like this is Xbox or something where they mysteriously walk through the stadium pillar, all right, when you're playing Xbox football. If you've ever played that before, you know what I'm talking about. And then it shows them picking old CK up, no blood on the shirt still, all right? You can see it, white, white, white. The blur goes off by this camera. The camera's pointed that way. You can see the handlebars had spun around watching this quote-unquote action, right? Not facing the audience, facing the action already. And then the blur goes over to the hatch door. Then you see a guy kneeling down, facing back towards the SUV that they quote-unquote took into. And then the blur goes to the hatch door, and then all of a sudden you see this group of men running back towards the SUV. If that were real, ladies and gentlemen, they wouldn't have had to do a two-step process. When they picked this person up, they would have rounded that corner, knocked that camera down, whatever they had to do, round that corner and off the safety. Not run to a hatch door straight out and then see this group of guys go this way. Then it shows you the arm. Every centimeter that you can slow down this quote-unquote taken to the SUV, the whole arm, hand to here, saturated in dried dye, it ain't blood, even again, AI, multiple apps, not real blood, all right? How did the blood dry, being shot, neck, stain the whole arm like a sleeve tattoo? You've seen those people who don't like their tattoos anymore and they go get a solid black arm, which is weird, all right? But it may have had something perverted on there and they just didn't want it anymore, so that was their only option. Or maybe they did that on purpose. Completely, quote-unquote, red tint. How did blood dry the whole every centimeter in a matter of a second or two? Then you got the executive orders. Executive Order 13913, telecommunications. You can't fire people over freedom of speech. President Trump, this January, put in executive order for freedom of speech. Then you go to Executive Order 14239, March this year. When you go look at the Executive Order 13961 from December the 7th, 2020, the invocation of continuity government, there's two others attached to it. The partial revocation by quote-unquote Joe on the last full 24-hour day of presidency, January the 19th, 2025. Quote-unquote Joe will wait to the last full 24-hour day to partially revoke a continuity government. That makes no sense. Then this Executive Order 14239. And in this 14239, that ties into your continuity government, it specifically talks about federal preparedness, law enforcement, etc. But it's got multiple things in it. National security memorandums from 2022 and 2020. Why would quote-unquote Joe's, if he can't even have an order of succession, there's that in there. It's got presidential policy directive by Obama in there, 2013. That's for national security specialty events, which are Super Bowl security, which would be Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security, law enforcement, federal and local. There's only been 3 other funerals in U.S. history for national security specialty events. That was President Reagan, President Ford, and President Bush. And 2 of those have executive orders 11905 and 12333 for political assassinations that just so happen to be in unconventional warfare, just so happen to be in special operations, just so happen to be in Supreme Court docket 23-939 filed March 19, 2024. That ties in Obama to murder. And Obama's not in the what? War Powers Act. Also in this Executive Order 14239, March, it gives a 90-day order, a 180-day order, and a 240-day order. That's July this year, December this year, and March of next year. Also in this executive order, it talks about the restoring of freedom of speech. What did President Trump sign way back here? And he has another freedom of speech order way back in his first term. And then it says in there a little code word. This is how they get you. In a good way. Because they're not ready for full disclosure, but because there's a visual there, I can show you that if you're willing to listen. Cognitive infrastructure. Go Google that. You know what cognitive infrastructure is? Artificial intelligence. And all of these just so happen to be an executive order that is tied into a continuity government, which is tied into a presidential emergency action document, which expands the power of the president, established by President Eisenhower. See how long these laws have been in place? You can't fire somebody for having a freedom of speech. It has to be under a wartime order. Which I guess that's why Supreme Court ruled that President Trump can use the what? 1798 Aliens Act. But guess what was left off of that? Guess who's on multiple podcasts way back before September the 10th telling you what? Hey, there's one thing people are leaving off. The 1798 Aliens and Seditions Act. You'll have historians who are deep state. You'll have all these people say, oh, it expired in 1800. It expired because it's an actionable order. You don't use it unless you're in wartime order, wartime command, supreme commander, wartime president, special, unique, strategic laws and orders that outline a special operation, not a normal, like page 46 says in joint publication, that generally you don't use this unless what? Congress or Constitution deems so. And the laws and orders invoked that outline the 45-47 show a unique strategic special operation. That is the 45-47. And you've seen what? CNN get hammered. You've seen PBS and NPR lose their funding. You're seeing ABC going through the ringer right now. MSNBC. You've seen The View now under investigation due to the FCC. There's your FCC. The View under investigation, FCC. But it's already happened. See, you're watching the layout of it. It's already happened. That is restricting telecommunications, which is a wartime power, emergency power. 47 U.S. Code, Section 606, War Powers of the President is what it's titled. FCC, Team Telecom, all these tie in. You can't fire someone over freedom of speech unless there's a wartime order in place. And the Supreme Court clarified that for you, 1798 Aliens Act, but also Seditions Act. Guess what the seditions part does? It can punish you Americans for writing anything that goes against the military or the government, the president. Malicious, fraudulent, scandalous, whatever it is. That's why it pays to know laws and orders. That's why it pays. And that's what you're witnessing. That's what you're watching. The whole thing, 45-47 is operation. Charlie Kirk, the whole thing. Otherwise, what would be priority about naming a woman, young woman, the CEO before a funeral with no casket and no burial? What would be priority about all these things? What would be priority about her speaking a day and a half after her love of her life was murdered on TV? What would be priority? If she was just going to speak at the funeral with no casket, why was it so prevalent to speak a day and a half later? They overproduce this on purpose. Because the target audience, guess what you're doing? You're falling for it. Because you're the what? You're the target audience. But you don't have to be. You can know what I know. It's all public. It's all public laws and orders. What's not public is the what? Intellect. Intelligence. That's what is not public. That requires initiative, critical thinking, strategic thinking, skill sets, divorcing your emotions, divorcing your feelings. Because that's what you're witnessing. That's what you're watching. All of it. Every aspect of it. Then they use the Air Force the next day. So it's not private. For people to say, well, it's private. They wanted a private. No, it's not. They use the Air Force. If President Trump was not a wartime commander in a special military operation with a disclosure coming down the road that will absolutely prove 45-47, which has already been proven, but for the ones who just want to remain in the target audience, those who have to wait to the last time period, the last day of revelation, of validation, all those people, if President Trump was a real, every 4 years, this wasn't a military operation, he would have lost the veteran community for sure then. Because a dude who's not visually a veteran, you don't use the Air Force, you don't use Air Force soldiers for someone who's not a veteran, ladies and gentlemen. And then they showed this video awkwardly over her shoulder, laying on his hands, yellow hands. I've been around more corpses than I ever want to be in my life, but I have. I've seen so many hands in death. Never yellow. Go read about that. That's an awkward video. That took it out of the private realm. But we can't see a face. So if I came up to you on the street and I said, all right, you get two options. If you don't choose one, I'm going to beat your rear end. And let's say I put the fear of God in you that I was actually going to do that. Or hold your eyes open and make you see one of them. You get to see a guy get shot on TV and the blood and that. Or you get to see the corpse. Which one do you want? Most people are going to choose option B. When they showed the hands in the casket, that went away from it being quote-unquote private. All right. Then they showed her or somebody filming the casket in a garage, being put into a hearse. There was like a 1930-something Packard sitting over there, old car. What's that all about? Come on, people. They overproduce this. They overproduce it. And then we see the 21st, the whole order of succession sitting in one location, one building. If it wasn't an operation, that was the most stupid thing that any president administration could do, is put the whole administration in one building in one location. That is a national security disaster. Even if it wasn't enemy out there, it could be the building fall down, earthquake take place. Come on, people. They show it to you all the time. The whole order of succession, the orders of succession that old quote-unquote Joe didn't have, the whole order of succession is sitting right there from the president, vice president, secretary of defense, secretary of state, chiefs, all kinds of White House, everything, cabinet in one location? No, ladies and gentlemen, come on. At a funeral with no casket, a funeral with no burial, a funeral with no resting place. Then they show her just this past week on set, giggling, laughing, happy, but she was sitting at the apex, the turning point. Everything has a visual, but everything also has a visual good and also showing you, no, this ain't real. Ain't no woman sitting there, mother, widow, love of her life, giggling, laughing, and all this other stuff, not choking up. Come on, people. Come on, people. Not to mention they've showed multiple Ericas and some women out there, you're just struggling. You just can't see it. You're struggling. That wouldn't be priority to be changing your eyebrows and your makeup and all these other things, your eye color, etc., your chin, everything. No, that wouldn't be priority if you just lost the love of your life. All right, y'all going to be looking like some ratchet stuff. Yeah, y'all going to be looking like that. But you ain't going to be looking, oh, I got to fix this up. I got to change this up and this there. No. Snap out of it, ladies. Those few of you ladies out there, come on, snap out of it. It wouldn't be priority for that. All right, not at all. Then on the 22nd, DHS puts out an article. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, puts out an article that's cohesive with the NSSE. So the NSSE, the National Security Special Event. All right, trying to slang it up a little bit. Didn't work. Acronyms suck sometimes. Department of Homeland Security, September the 22nd, the day after the funeral with no casket, they're putting out an article. Oh, we got everything together in 6 days' time. Record fashion. It's all cohesive with military operation, military occupation, continuity of government, 45-47. That's your 90-day prescription, 100-day prescription, and 240 days. All right. And as long as the laws show we're in a partial continuity government, we're in a military operation. We're in a military occupation. And if you believe that President Trump was right about everything, and as you should, but if you're a patriot, Republican, conservative, if you believe that President Trump was right about everything, then he has to be right about everything because he already has been. Therefore, you have to know he is in full control of this nation, but this is an operation. Most of these things have already taken place. Now you're seeing Obama pipe up, Hillary pipe up, Comey, all these things. It's leading straight to the subpoenas. They're already doing subpoenas in August and September, but most people are focused on Bill and Hillary in just a week with Hillary, and then the next week with quote-unquote Bill and quote-unquote Hillary. But that's what people are focused on. And it does tie into Supreme Court docket 23-939 and a bunch of others with Jack Smith and all these others that President Trump has filed. Donald J. Trump versus United States. It's coming, baby. It's coming. President Trump told you get ready for the quick trials. Nobody focused on September the 10th about the quote-unquote goriness. Even though it wasn't real, no one focused on that. Everybody went to emotions, feelings. You thought if it was your hero, icon, all that, that's what you went to. Nobody focused on the gore because you're used to Yellowstone, Ozark, Walking Dead, and all these shows. You've seen all that, so it didn't affect you. So you're ready for what? You're ready for firing squads. you're ready for justice. You're ready for it, and the ones that don't know about it, they're going to be ready for it too, and they're going to see it. So just hang tight. A lot of things are rolling that way. We got to get through all that before we can get to the real golden age, the July the 4th, 2026, which is supposed to be one of the biggest celebrations in world history. It's coming, baby. It's coming. So I would highly suggest you take this whole video, go back through it, write them down, study it. If you can't afford this book right here, these two, I get it. I understand, but Rattletrap, RATTLETRAP 1776.com, Rattletrap 1776.com. Hey, I'm independent, no publisher, it's all me, straight off the top of the dome right here, baby. All the laws and orders by President Donald John Trump in chronological order that outlines 45-47. If you can't afford it, great. That's what I got platforms for. I operate what I've been tasked to do, what they tasked me to do, on my time, but on my dime. It's still on me. I didn't have to accept it, but I did. So there should be anybody complaining out there. My Facebooks are not monetized, meaning I don't make money on the videos. All right? They're flagged anyway. But I don't make money doing that. This is all on me. I give you every increment from .gov, .mil sites that outline what you're witnessing is the 45-47 strategic special operation. That is what makes President Donald John Trump so unique, but that's also what makes this operation so unique. It also highlights and pays tribute and honor to every memorial grave out there, every veteran, every active duty, reserve, National Guard, that will be a veteran one day. All this does is pay tribute to that and honor all of us veterans, all of us who have paid the price, the ones that pay the price that we know, friends and family. Civil affairs, different people, the contractors that are good contractors. There are some in the civilian sectors that are doing certain things that are good. All right, not the ones tied to the other stuff. There's a lot of entities out there, leaders and world leaders. There's a lot of entities. So I highly suggest you divorcing your feelings, divorcing your emotions. If you love President Trump, you should love him even more. If you love the military, you should love us even more. All right? If you were on the fence to begin with, you should get your butt off the fence, get over on the right side of humanity. This isn't a Republican thing, conservative thing, patriot thing, from the standpoint of MAGA only. This is humanity, patriotism. The Declaration of Independence has been flipped back on its foundation. You're going to see it all, and we're going to enjoy it all. Together, in harmony, in unity. So hang tight. We ain't done yet.